Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Comix Fiend podcast, issue number 1. That's right, your daily talk for comics. So, we're going to kick this off here with a series, I guess, of movie reviews from the past. Now, I don't want to spoil any brand new movies or any old movies. Well, obviously, I'm going to spoil some old movies here. Um, I haven't watched some of these in a little bit, but I have my thoughts on, old school Marvel movies and old school movies in general. What makes me qualified to talk about this? Well, I'm a white guy in my 30s, so it's kind of like the development paths in RPGs where, like, well, what gives you the right to make a podcast? Well, you see, I'm a white guy, and once you hit like 30, white guys have like a couple different choices. I know I'm saying this a lot. Guys in general, I should say, have two choices to make. You either make podcasts or you start making IPAs. And since I don't really drink, I figured I will start a podcast. And here we are. This is issue 1 of Comix Fiend. And I figured issue 1 works pretty well considering what we're going to be talking about. Now, it might not all be comic talk all the time. We might be random movies, pop culture, really anything you guys want to talk about. Just leave me suggestions and we'll get right to it. Now, with this program, I have boxes of comics I can go over as well. When I talk boxes, I have an army. I probably have over 2,000 comics at least. So if you ever want like issue by issue reads, I got you. If you want me to check up anything special, let me know and I'll look into what I got. My most recent read was the Sam Alexander run in Nova. It's about 10 years old when it started. It started right before Superior Spider-Man kicked off. So it was like the early to mid 2000s. Don't mind that beep. I will get it taken care of, and I'll try to edit it out if I can. Um, it is essentially Spider-Man without being Spider-Man. Now, Sam Alexander is probably one of the coolest, like, teenagers, I guess, around. I'm getting off topic. That was one of the conversations we can have. This one's just going to kind of be an introductory. I don't want to make it super long, but I guess podcasts can go for a little bit. I'm going to try to get you guys about 10 to 15 minutes of content every day. I think I can etch that into a schedule to make life easy and make issues digestible so you're not sitting here just listening to my voice going through whatever I'm going through. Now, you're probably wondering, what is this gonna entail? What are we gonna talk about? What are we gonna do? What's life? What is the answer to the question? The most important question of all. Well, the answer is 42. Now, if you've watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I highly recommend watching that movie. Granted, it is about 17 years old now. Fantastic read, great movie. It stars Alan Rickman, Martin Freeman, Sam Rockwell, Mos Depp. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Zoe Deschanel. I always mess their names up. Um, Fantastic cast. Several actors from Harry Potter. It's got Vernon Dursley from Harry Potter. It's got Scrimgeour from Harry Potter. It's got obviously Severus Snape from Harry Potter. All around, fantastic movie. Highly recommend watching. Now, as we get to, I will talk just pop culture and things in the news like that. I don't want to get down and dreary with politics, so we're going to do our best to avoid politics. However, when you're talking comics, a lot of times politics go hand in hand, and it's an unfortunate side effect that you can't really turn a blind eye to what's going out in the world today, no matter where you turn. And I know comics is kind of one of those things that people use to escape and like, they're putting politics on our comics. But listen, comics have always been political. Whether you realize it or not, there's been little politics here and there. If you look at the X-Men, for instance, they were built during the Civil War times. They were not Civil War, sorry. Civil Rights Movement times. Civil War, silly me. That was much later in the comics history. But X-Men, for instance, were put at the forefront of the civil rights movement because they stood for mutant kind, which was kind of an allegory for people fighting for their rights back then. They wanted mutant rights. They wanted equal rights, just like people back then wanted equal rights. When you look into it, X-Men represents everybody. The good, the bad, the ugly, the in-between. X-Men represents everybody. Um, because you do see supremacy in there. You do see the people, a lot of times when you're looking at Magneto from back then, he's like, oh, mutants are better than everybody. And Xavier's just like, no, we want the same for everybody. We don't want to be treated differently. Yes, we're different, but we want to be treated the same. So like I said, politics are a lot of times are going to go hand in hand with some of our conversations. I'm going to do my best not to have that. But unfortunately, it is a side effect of our times. It's going to happen. It's in our media everywhere you look. But also, don't forget that there are people doing the right thing everywhere. You know what I mean? It's not like you're going to run into Spider-Man. Okay, with Spider-Man in general, I'm going to use this as a good point of view here. When you're looking at the comics, Spider-Man's always doing the right thing, right? Always. Almost 90% of the time, he's trying to do what's right by his own, moral compass, so to speak. Because with great power comes great responsibility. Yet we have somebody almost consistently talking negative about him through J. Jonah Jameson. And with JJJ always talking negative, using negative press, it turned the public opinion on Spider-Man. And regardless of what he was doing, he was always trying to do the right thing. And it was always like, oh, we need to arrest you because you're a vigilante. I think that was a very heavy-handed topic in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was also reflected in the Sam Raimi trilogy when they were like, hey, we got to take you in because you're a vigilante. And Spider-Man's like, I don't think so. I've got to go save somebody. And the cop's like, I'll arrest you when you come back. Like, he never came back. He knew better. However, I will also say during those Raimi movies, they did a fantastic job casting three characters actually. I have to give a shout out to Rosemary Harris, who played a fantastic Aunt May, in my opinion, the best Aunt May that we've had on screen. Because she's supposed to be an older lady. She's not supposed to be getting progressively younger here as we've gotten through the trilogies. J. Jonah Jameson, you cannot top J.K. Simmons playing him. He was the best character actor you could choose for that part. That man, I swear, loves all things comics and film because he has been in a little bit of everything. Through Invincible, through the DC movies where he's playing Gordon. He's also, obviously J.K. Simmons. I just said J.K. Simmons. He's J. Jonah Jameson in both Spider-Man movies because he is that good at his role that I don't think anybody could replace him. So another one that we had, I think Willem Dafoe just knocked it out of the park with Green Goblin. Like, he understood that character to a degree that I don't think anybody else has really seen in characters. It's very hard to find somebody that ascends the role of the villain. And there's a handful of villains out there that, like, obviously knocked it out of the park, and they're the memorable part of their movie. I feel like Spider-Man 1, the most memorable part, is Green Goblin. I love the spider bite. I love a lot about that movie, but I think that Norman did, I think he did such a good job at playing that villain that, granted, the suit took away from it. Like, we couldn't see, and we saw it later on when he's like, hey, listen, I'm going to do my own stunts in No Way Home. And they took the mask off, and you realize how truly terrifying Green Goblin can be. And that was just amazing to see Willem Dafoe really be able to capture a character that he hadn't played in 20 years or so, about 18 years. And he just knocked it out of the park. He was terrifying, he was cunning, he was smart, he was everything that Norman should be. Yeah, in that first movie, like I said, Rosemary Harris, fantastic Aunt May. She was the kind, sweet, caring old lady that Peter needed. And I do like how in the second one, like I said, we're just going to go over comic talk every day. So bear with me when my mind travels. The squirrels keep running. And this is actually going to be about Spider-Man. Today's topic, Spider-Man. There we go. Marvel. This is going to be a Marvel-heavy topic. But I'm also changing up topics a few times because I know I've mentioned DC. Well, I haven't mentioned DC. We're gonna mention DC in a different episode. Tomorrow's episode, we'll go over DC heroes done right and villains done right. But right now, we're just doing Spider-Man. We're gonna do it that way. We're gonna go over the live action. Bear with me, because again, squirrely brain. So from here, for the next 5 minutes, this is gonna be Spider-Man talk. So if you don't like Spider-Man, I don't know what's wrong with you. Getting back to it, Norman did such a good job at his role. I don't think anybody other than... So these are the top actors that I think really knocked this out of the park. That's the way I'm going to put it. Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn is probably the top actor for those movies. Right behind him is Rosemary Harris as Aunt May. Aunt May, Rosemary Harris knocked it out of the park. Especially in Spider-Man 2, when they like subtly hinted that she knew that he was Spider-Man. Especially like when she's like, oh, if you can move the desk by yourself. And honestly, Spider-Man 1 was a good movie. Spider-Man 2 is my all-time favorite. Like, if I had to pick any superhero sequel to watch again, like sequel, not end of the trilogy, sequel, Spider-Man 2, hands down. DC, Marvel, don't care. Spider-Man 2 is hands down my favorite movie. I feel like the themes were there, the struggle was there, the juxtaposition of the villains was there. I appreciated what Sam Raimi was trying to do. I think that Aunt May did a great job. I think that finally Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane finally got the chemistry that we needed to see. I was a little annoyed that they shoehorned in Jameson's kid. I feel like we didn't need that attachment, but I understand where it came from, because at this point you have a man that has these powers that he's supposed to go out and do these great things, but his daily life struggles. Like, he can do these amazing things, but no one can know, because if they do know, they could get hurt. And I feel like that's a struggle that a lot of superhero movies don't always deal much with. We've seen Batman kind of deal with it a little bit in the first Batman Begins movie with Rachel, and how he let his feelings kind of get in the way there, and obviously we know what happens there. As far as Peter Parker goes, it's been interesting, through the comics, through the shows, through the movies, he's always shown struggling. And they've even shown, like, the comic sales start going down when he does well for himself. So, like, as comic fans, it'd be nice if we could all get together and be like, hey, listen, can Peter have it go right for once? Because after the Civil War, like, I am going off topic. Back to movies. So we talked about Spider-Man 1 and 2. Spider-Man 3 was terrible. It's not, like, trash, but it's not good either. Like, it's mediocre at best. And I feel like it was a victim of studios getting in the way of the movie. I feel like Venom was forced. I feel like it should have waited one more movie. It could have been hinted at the end of Spider-Man 3. Like, have Jameson come back from the moon landing at the end of the movie, or even the beginning of the movie, I'm okay with. But at the end, like, have Venom make a quick appearance, and then not, like, appear for the rest of the movie until the very end. I feel like we were given Kurt Connors in almost a Mysterio role back then, and we never got to see it come to fruition. Because I truly feel like Bruce Campbell should have been, like, a Mysterio in the Sam Raimi movies. Because he was in the first one, second one, and the third one, in varying entertainment roles. And I feel like him playing Quentin Beck would have tied it all together. And it would have been I know Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell work really well together. And they were just kind of cameos, but it could have led to something more, and they just kind of dropped the ball with it, I feel like. I do feel like Sony was like, we need Venom now! And it just kind of shoehorned it in. Like, we had other characters in place, and they were worried about Lizard being a B-tier villain. And then several years later, we've got Lizard in The Amazing Spider-Man, because that makes sense. That they were like, okay, we're going to restart the whole franchise because Sam Raimi can't get the movie he wants done. So they turned it into something else. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like they could have done more with it. And they were going to do Spider-Man 4, I know it, and then it fell apart because Sam Raimi couldn't make the movie he wanted to make. And I feel like that's in part because Spider-Man 3 didn't live up to the expectations that everybody wanted it to have. And I don't blame Sam Raimi for a lot of that. I blame studio interference. And then we get to Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man 1, I feel like was a pretty solid movie. I liked it. I had a good time watching it. I thought the suit change was different, which was needed. Something to really stand out from the Tobey series. Andrew Garfield was a fantastic Spider-Man. He was quippy. He had the jokes on point. His chemistry with Emma Stone was fantastic. And then the second one happened. And again, studio interference was like, hey, we're going to put 3 or 4 villains in this movie to convolute the storyline, and we want more out of this because this is just the middle of the road. We're going to expand from here. We're going to intertwine so many different stories now, because this is when Marvel was starting to hit the MCU, and their MCU was hitting their strides. Like, Marvel movies were knocking it out of the park. And the Andrew Garfield movie just didn't do well again. And I don't blame Andrew Garfield. I still think he was a good Spider-Man. I just feel like the studio didn't do him the justice he deserved. And I will always say that. I've never said that he's a bad Spider-Man. I think he was a little bit of a bad Peter Parker. But I don't think he was a bad Spider-Man at all. He is one of my... I hate to say it because out of the 3, he's my least favorite. But because, again, I grew up with Tobey, so I'm going to always kind of go with Tobey as being one of my favorites. But out of the 3, there's no bad. There's no bad there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that he's the worst. I just think he got the short end of the stick in the long run of the movies. Because the second movie failed him. He didn't fail that movie. The movie failed him. And they had such a gut-wrenching scene with, Emma Stone's character of Gwen, and then they just, cut some of the stuff out. They removed characters. Their director I don't think, had his full vision out there. And then we cut to the MCU. And Sony's like, oh, hey, our Spider-Man franchise is terrible. What are we going to do? So then Disney's like, hey, I got an idea. Here's some money. And we get Spider-Man in Civil War, which I was like, holy crap. That's amazing. I've never thought I would see Spider-Man in the MCU because Sony had such a chokehold on Spider-Man. Because Sony, when Marvel was shipping out all the rights, Sony's like, yeah, we don't want anybody else. We just want Spider-Man. Which, come to think back on it, I'm kind of glad Sony didn't grab them all. Because I'm glad they're in the hands they're in. I would like to see darker Marvel movies, which we did get a little bit with Doctor Strange, but that's for another time. With this most recent, with the MCU acquisition, it was nice to see a fresh face, Tom Holland, newer actor. I didn't know much about him. The one thing is, I kind of wish his writing was better, because I feel like he's not quippy enough. And I have felt that way pretty much the entire time that Tom Holland's been Spider-Man. He's just not talking enough when he's fighting. And maybe it's just the writers don't know how to do it, or they're just trying to make him more a little bit serious. But Spider-Man is supposed to be incessantly talking while he's fighting, and he doesn't shut up. Like, that's the whole thing, that on the streets in the comics, they know if Spider-Man's quiet, they've messed up. Because a quiet Spider-Man is a deadly Spider-Man. You can quote me on that. So they really just didn't nail that so much, and I don't like that in Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, they made him feel much more Iron Man 2.0. Like, I like when Peter can kind of be on his own, like they did in Far From Home. I felt like it was Far From Home was a much better standalone Spider-Man story that the Marvel had told. I feel like Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home were just extension of Iron Man movies. They weren't really Spider-Man movies per se. Like Homecoming, he's consistently trying to prove himself to Tony. And Far From Home, he's reeling over Tony's death and the powers that Tony had given him. And obviously in No Way Home, he's dealing with the fallout of the powers that Tony had left him. So like Iron Man has been felt throughout basically the MCU in general, but much more heavy in the Spider-Man movies than any of the other movies that we've had. And I get it; it's because they had a close relationship. I just feel like Spider-Man, who has canonically a higher IQ in the comics than Tony does, should be able to stand on his own just a little bit more than he does now, if that makes sense. I'm curious where they go from here. I think that Tom Holland has great chemistry with Zendaya. I'm glad they're dating in real life. I feel like the main three casts did a great job together. I'd like to see more, but I'd also like to see them separate a little bit. Like, I know that they've already started kind of cast calling for Spider-Man 4, and all three of them are coming back from what I've heard. Those are the rumors. And I know some people are like, well, we don't want Zendaya back right away, but I'm okay with her popping up as this is where she is now. And like maybe have the next movie take place in Christmas or something like that. So she's coming back to New York City from Boston. And she sees Spider-Man swinging, and he like at the end of the movie saves the day. But have like a different love interest introduced. Or not even a love interest at all. I'm okay if he doesn't find anybody. I'm okay if he's just like it's not even Gwen Stacy. Like it's Betty Bryant at the Bugle, which wouldn't make much sense because, you know, they didn't have them even dating in the movies, but they dated in the comics. They could introduce Gwen. I'd be okay with it. But personally, I would rather see Emma Stone play Gwen Stacy in a Spider-Gwen movie. If they were to do a live-action Spider-Gwen, I'd like to see Emma Stone play that part. I think she could still handle it very well. Or if they want to go with a younger actress, I don't know who would play it, but I would like to see a Spider-Gwen movie. And maybe a few more female spiders in general, because there are more out there now. I know that there's also rumors that Toby might be getting a fourth movie, or Andrew might get a third movie. I'm down for both. I personally would like to see Toby's future when he gets back. I'd like to see Kirsten Dunst and Tobey Maguire back together again in another movie. Personally, I'd like to see him be a teacher. And I mean, he already looked like the youth pastor look, so it'd be kind of cool to see him as like a teacher with a daughter. I think it'd be kind of cool to see Mayday pop up in his universe and have Spider-Girl make an appearance. Like, we don't need all the clones to bog everything down, but I think that would be kind of cool there. If we did an Amazing Spider-Man 3, I don't know where we would go, essentially. I think that he could fight his own Sinister Six. I think that'd be kind of neat, considering he's got the experience of already fighting Sinister Six. Or Sinister 4 or 5? 5? Because, let's be honest, there's only 5 of them, and Venom didn't do a thing. But I'd like to see him go back into his backstory with his parents being spies and his dad being alive. It would be interesting to see that all break down. And even like him come back and Gwen be there. Because if everybody who knew that Spider-Man was brought back to that time, technically speaking, Gwen would still be alive because she would have been teleported before she died. So I'd like to see that kind of play out. I think that'd be kind of a cool way to do it. This is where I'm going to wrap up, because I didn't want to go this long, but here I am going this long anyways. So listen, guys, this is Comix Fiend issue 1. Stay tuned. Same bat time. This is probably copyrighted, so I don't want to say the rest of that line. But same comic time, same comic channel. Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial, because we'll be back later. And this is a word from our sponsors, which are absolutely none right now, because it is just me with a microphone and a laptop starting this off. So if you feel like you have anything to add to this podcast, please feel free to, drop a line, drop a recommendation. Let's go somewhere. Let's see what we can do. Let's make this Comix Fiend great. And by the way, if you hear beeping, I apologize. It is something I'm actively working on. So until next time, you guys, stay frosty.